Well, I think it's important to know is that I was born in California. I was raised in California. And in my blood, I am a Californian. And the way you see that is that I'm not limited to boxes, to categories. And so as a young person, my sister, who was a year and a half younger than I, and I were a great twosome. We managed to get into mischief and campaigned in the neighborhood. I have no idea what this proposition was about, but I saw in third grade, I saw the convention on the television, and I saw they had demonstrations. So there was Proposition 3, whatever that was. And so I organized the kids in the neighborhood to have a demonstration. So we made signs and we marched around the neighborhood like they had done it on the television. So I have no idea if we had any impact. I don't think I knew we were just for something, you know, and it was important to speak out. So I learned that early on, but in the California style, it wasn't limited to other people. And that, but that it wasn't something that only grown-ups could do. I never even thought that it was something for kids to do, that it would be a question. Of course we did, and my parents supported it. So they were mildly amused, I think. But, my sister and I had an orientation to justice and to working, and then Kennedy ran for president, and we were Kennedy girls, and my sister and I wrote a paper on why my relatives should vote for Kennedy, and we were all involved in politics. And then my sister, when we were in high school, I was a senior in high school, she was a sophomore, she got sick. She got diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease and was given 3 to 5 years to live. The irony is now it's a curable disease, but it wasn't then. And she did die 5 years later. But I think for me, her being diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease really put life and death up close. And I knew life was short and we needed to do what we could. And so I ended up joining my community for that reason, I think, partially. And we're Sisters of Social Service. We're all about social justice. We're all about, our foundress was the first woman in the Hungarian parliament in Hungary. She, recently, her body was moved from New York, where she died in exile. The Hungarian parliament voted to move her body back to be buried in the cemetery for their national heroes, since she was the first woman in parliament. So politics was in our bones. But I joined our community to do whatever was needed. But I knew it needed to, for me it was politics or the political needed to be engaged for reasons of faith and in a group that had support. So that's sort of the shorthand of how I got here. There's probably a whole bunch of other stories, but here I am. Well, one of the big problems in our nation right now is this rugged individualism that people think we have to do it alone. I'm by myself. And the fact is, we're not built to be alone. We're built to be community, in connection, in support of each other. And so the effort to try to make change in our nation, try to do some of the healing from all the divisiveness that's going on, needs communal virtues. Communal virtues like hope. Hope is a communal virtue. One time when I was working at Network, the organization that I led in DC, I was really miserable, and I said I was going to go home, I needed to generate some hope, and I got home and I laughed at myself. Hope is only generated in the group, together. And for me, faith becomes an important part of that, because faith gives us a perspective where everyone is respected, everyone has value, and that it's together we create the future. And so in the together we create the future is where hope lies. But to do it all by myself, that was just silly. It doesn't work. Now the challenge is, again, it's a communal effort. So often we question, oh, my impact, I'm just one individual. That's an easy cop-out. Because the fact is, if one person goes with another person, goes with another person, goes with another person, then you end up having impact. And so, for me, it comes down to a faith stance and we the people. I owe it to my fellow residents of the United States to do my part, because that's democracy. That's democracy. So that's what we're working on, doing it together. To bridge divides in our current reality, we can't start with the most difficult extreme. Bridges are not built with the extremes. What you need is to be planted, grounded in your values, not your beliefs, but your values. And then what you do is you build out gradually till you meet in the center. That's where bridges get built, in the center. And then the last piece that you build is from those pylons to the shore, the most extreme. And so the first part we've got to start with is building bridges through the middle, where we have sane conversation. We know that it's not as media reports, that there's a whole bunch of other perspectives out there, but we have to be willing to ask questions and to talk. And that's how bridges are built. You don't start at the far end and then cantilever out and then kind of fall in the middle. So I think it's engineering, social engineering. We got to be involved. We got to talk to each other. The other piece is, it's really important, is that we can't talk to people who think differently all the time. Sometimes we're just not in a good mood. If I watch something on television, I'm in a bad mood. I'm not going to go talk to somebody who's really different from me. So you have to be, for me, it's about being centered in some sort of prayer grounded context, and then open my heart to receive another person, who I say is also a child of God. I sometimes joke and say they might be a mistake of God, but they're still a child of God. So they need to be welcomed by me, because who am I? I also could be called a mistake. Some people have. So it's all about our willingness to open ourselves to being changed ourselves, and valuing community more than I value my independence. I think also some of the work that I've done by going to bookstores in conservative areas, convening groups, and just not doing the political polarization, but rather saying, talk to me about your community. Educate me about what does it mean to live here. Who are you? How do you live? Talk to me. And then having different perspectives show up. Last year I was in the South, I was in Columbus, Mississippi, and they started talking about the segregation academies. Well, the segregation academies are the ones that were founded after Brown versus Board of Education to promote segregation. They are just and that's what they call them, segregation academies, which have always had the reputation of being the good schools because they're the white schools. And in our group, this African American teacher who had been teaching in a segregation academy went to the public school. And she discovered, much to her surprise, the public school was great. It was so much better than where she was teaching before. She was recruiting some of her fellow teachers and changing the narrative. So it's happening, but it's happening at the local level. It's happening, changing the narrative that has shaped Columbus, Mississippi for 60 years. Well, Seeds of Justice is an important seed, an important resource that can then sprout and develop roots, and you might need to call yourself something else down the road, maybe a tree of justice or a bush or something else. But the important piece is it brings together people to work together, frustrating as that might be, on building a shared vision of who your community can become. And it's true all over the country, because we know this work is hard work. You can't do it alone, and you need to support each other in trying to make a difference. So for the youth, to us old people, gray-haired people like me, relax. Youth are youth. Encourage their creativity. Encourage what they find as problematic in our society. Encourage them to be creative. Lord knows when I was young, I've already told you, I've been engaged in all kinds of things since I was little. And it'll flourish. old people worry too much about young people. And we try to micromanage, well, they should come to our meetings. No, they should not come to our meetings. We will bore them to death. Let them figure out a way to show what they care about. I was at St. Louis University, and we talked about ways to let them talk about societal change and engagement and what matters to them, especially in terms of family supports and young families being able to afford childcare or being able to be engaged in creating artistic communities. But let the young people lead that. And let's old people lead old people stuff. But let's quit thinking because we don't have young people coming to our old people meeting, we're failing. No, we're not. We're just being age appropriate. So let's be age appropriate, shall we? What a radical thought. I think the critical thing in our nation right now is that we see each other as human beings. And in my faith tradition, we had this catechism answer, made in the image and likeness of God. Now, I do think there are a few people that are mistakes of God, but it's not helpful for me to think that way, and I'm wrong. It's just that I don't understand the role they're playing. But if I hold the thought that we are together, human beings, flawed as we are, willing to work together to create a, as we say in politics, a more perfect union, then I think we can make a difference for the future. But what it requires is a love that surpasses understanding. And for me, that's anchored in faith. Other people find it in other places. But we need to work on loving each other. Just saying.